After the riots ended, we drove up and down 12th Street, and for months, just seeing the charred buildings, the burnt buildings, almost like Rome has its ruins, it was almost like Detroit's ruins. And those images forever have stayed with me.
This is where my father's record shop was on 12th Street.
Right here?
Right here.
So this is a picture of your dad in the store, doorway of the store.
In the doorway.
And so where would this have
The doorway would be right about right here.
I see. So
about
it would be like
right here. Yes. I just remember in the floor, all of this detritus, all of this muck and mire. And I felt my father's defeat. It's a mixture of almost an embarrassment to see your father defeated like that. There was a lot going on in those moments when I saw my father, you know, hit that last straw on the camel's back, because it wasn't just looting, in my opinion, that killed him. It was all that he had gone through. And that became too much to bear. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's difficult.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And so now here we are.
In this bucolic, peaceful place.
Mm-hmm.
You would never know that such a thing went on, that the city was so plagued by inequality that it caused an explosion like that.
Mm-hmm.
All over Detroit, communities respond. At the Sacred Heart Seminary, Jamon's family narrative connects with the story of the city through an unlikely monument.
My family lived in this neighborhood. Members of my family, my great aunt and her son, they were in this neighborhood in the city of Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And the house painter, Joe Nelson, who was my cousin, came to the grotto where this statue of Jesus, was painted white at that time. And he painted it black. I'm proud that my cousin painted this black. Many people, particularly in a system that is racist, didn't believe that African Americans are worthy enough to have a picture of the divine figure of Jesus Christ painted in their likeness. The following morning, the Sacred Heart Seminary repainted it white. Mm-hmm. And over a couple of nights, it was painted from black to white again. And then eventually the Sacred Heart Major Seminary left it as black, and they maintained it that way as a symbol of their connection with this community.
Who knew that this Madonna and child, Jamon's great aunt and cousin Joe, would change the face of Jesus in Detroit's family album and become a symbol of how the city will change? For the next 25 years, the demons of Detroit's past plague its future. White flight, abandoned buildings, arson, the decline of the auto industry, bankruptcy. But the comeback city can't be kept down. Where some see ruins or garbage left for trash, others see raw material for their creative visions. Artist Tim Burke is transforming pieces of old Detroit right in his backyard.
These terracotta pieces, this is from East Town Theater. They tore it down. I went and got pieces of it.
Wow.
These bits and pieces of old buildings become part of Tim's story.
This is a much younger Tim.
With this photograph here, stepdad was on the scene at that time. The violent alcoholic stepdad. So at a point I started to address the trauma in my life from the age of 7 until I was 19, being brought up in a violent alcoholic drug-addicted family. I had started addressing those traumatic issues, and I addressed them through my art as well. So the stuff behind us, like this big flower, it's made with metal from the Packard Motor Car Company, the Studebaker Car Company, the J.L. Hudson's building. I'm using broken down material as much as I was building my inner self with art, coming from a broken down, thrown into the trash heap kind of life.
From out of the ashes, Tim gives these old buildings, even their discarded contents, a new life.
So where did you find this image from?
This comes from 10,000 photo negatives,
I see.
which came from Blair Photography Studio. A lot of the negatives were strewn all over, right, curbside,
Yeah.
in bags.
So these images had been thrown out,
Yes.
and you
Trash.
salvaged them?
Yes.
So was the photo studio a Jewish photo studio? or-
I believe so, yes. There's bar mitzvahs, there's weddings. This was when Sammy Davis Jr. was here for a Bonds for Israel celebration.
And what is this photograph?
It was a Jewish bakery,
Oh, okay.
Star Bakery. I went to the Star Bakery on Coolidge. I took the photos in and I asked the lady, was this her family? And she said yes. She also worked in this particular bakery. So I gave her the photograph.
So you were reuniting people with their family photographs?
Yes.
When you gave that to her, how did it feel for you?
I was happy to be of service.
So you're learning about your neighbors and about your city and your
Right.
neighborhood.
Right.
Thousands of family stories reclaimed and repurposed by Tim, who saw in them a kindred spirit. That spirit lives on in the city's dreamers and organizers, who use the raw potential of today's Detroit to forge their visions of a better future.
So this is also a family photograph. Tell me the story of this.
This is a picture of the grocery store where I was working. My family is from Jordan. I came in 1967, and this is where I started doing business.
So this photograph symbolizes resilience to me and strength, because there wasn't a lot of people that my father knew when he immigrated to the country. And so to me, if he can make it and he didn't know anybody, didn't really have community, then I can do anything. So this photograph is of 3 young men from the Yemeni community that I have the pleasure to work with. One of the many things I do is engage the community in advocacy, knowing their rights and the things that they should be involved in civically. I love that I can be a mentor, but also learn from these young people and contribute to their growth.
This plus-size clothing company from Florida was like, you know what, Leah, you're dope, you're Muslim, you're plus size. We're gonna send you a bunch of stuff and we want you to model it. This was the last outfit of them all. I had some dollar store balloons, some dollar store balloons, girl, and I was like, you know what, let me just be fierce. I'm hot, I'm sweating, makeup like coming off my face. It's so ethereal, it's so powerful, it's so feminine, and I felt so amazing, you know, being a plus size hijabi. I looked like a fairy angel or something. And I just felt so powerful and beautiful at that moment. These pictures mean a lot to me.
This is how it should be. Your face should be covered. Your face should be covered. This is my mom, Ramona. My mom was probably the most important person to us as a child. Even now, she's still central to our lives.
This is my mom and her siblings right here. This picture is important because it kind of represents their migrant story. My mom did a lot of hustling. She did all sorts of jobs for the family, but we lived very poor, a very austere life because everything went into our education.
Siblings Antonio and Ramona are second-generation Detroiters. who are honoring their family narrative of sacrifice for the greater good.
My mom's parents, they're from Puerto Rico.
It's an image of their journey to Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like their, American dream story coming here, and this looks really fancy, but they struggled for sure. On my father's side, this is the Mexican family.
The Mexican side, okay.
Yeah. There was a lot of violence happening to Mexican folks in Texas in the 1950s and 60s. So they moved north just seeking a better life.
Wow, it's like a great migration story, but for Mexicans.
Yeah, for sure. So my parents both went to Detroit public schools. And our public school system has been historically deeply underfunded.
So they wanted more for us. Yeah. They wanted more than their parents had, more than what they have, and for them, it's an education.
Literally every extra dollar went into our education. They couldn't afford, this was beyond their means to send us to these schools. So essentially they mortgaged their house to pay for our high school education.
They mortgaged this house?
This house, yeah.
The house on the corner.
The red roof,
yeah.
And what happened to the house?
I received a call in 2009 from my mom saying, "Come home quick, the house is on fire." And I remember coming home and there's smoke billowing out of the front. There was guys who were throwing of our family's goods into a dumpster. It was like a shocking moment. It just incidentally, the house happened to catch fire the day it was being repossessed, which is this strange symbolic thing that this thing that represents so much of my parents' sacrifice. Even just the American dream in so many ways is getting burnt up in this house. Me and my brother were digging through the dumpster to pick up some of these family albums that are here today. That was a big wake-up call for me, in my growth and my, evolution as a person. So I went really hard into activism. I spend a lot of time educating communities, doing workshops at universities. I do workshops for free with youth. I found a lot of healing in agriculture and gardening. The big part of my work now is to take kids outdoors, to engage them in nature.
Tell me what was here. It looks like it's
Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts, that was collard greens. This is various types of kale. We had there. So these guys were actually here when we started all this garden. What was this like before we took it over? What was it like?
All trash, nasty stuff.
Yeah, it looked like a mess.
So what gave you the inspiration to create the garden?
I'm telling you.
Yeah. There's probably 8 to 10 families who eat off of this land and there's another maybe 10 families who have gotten into the garden resource program in the neighborhood.
And it seems like there's this urban farming movement here in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were
so
down.
You've
seen the resurgence of life that's happening downtown, and it's kind of driven by the corporate side of things, but there's so much beautiful things that are happening in the neighborhoods, like our farm project. There's so many projects like that all over Detroit, but yeah, that's kind of local sort of resurgence that we're seeing is we're definitely one of the leading cities in terms of urban agriculture in the United States.
The new activist of Detroit, motivating the next generation and tapping into their family legacies to cultivate new communities. There's an energy in today's Detroit, sparked by locals, new and old, who are actively engaged in the city's biggest reinvention yet. New artistic movements are taking hold and flourishing. And Detroiters are transforming themselves and their city. Detroit's Family Album, a tale of resilience, reinvention, and renaissance. The spirit of Detroit.